and it has proven to be a wonderful resource that people are coming to and looking to more and more as they have found it. We're finding, actually, what I see is we're getting less people are actually coming in for the live interview because they can watch it at any time they want after we put it up online, and that's okay, because that's the purpose of doing this. And what Greg and I are going to chat about tonight is our first Civil War 101 program. And for those of you who are on here, I'd like you to listen up to this and then spread the word and pass it to folks, because this is the start of something we're trying to do to work ourselves toward the next generation, and working to get those high school and pre-high school and college kids out there on the battlefields at a price that they can't say no. And frankly, all us old folks are really the vehicle to get those people out there to do that. And so this program with Greg and the one that next week we'll be interviewing with Norm Dazinger are the first two in that series to basically present a program that will reach across several disciplines to include military history, to help this new generation get a different perspective and perhaps get them as excited as we've been over all these years in the study of history and the study of the Civil War. And so when Greg and I engaged in our conversation tonight, is with that in mind, is thinking really about Fredericksburg area, Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville, as a resource for people to understand larger issues relative to the Civil War, and also to understand and appreciate the significance of Fredericksburg and indeed Chancellorsville in the Civil War. So it's an ambitious project, but one that we hope that you will find an interest in, and will pass the word to other people and do roundtables. Frankly, the concept of this is one person coming in, one adult like you, coming in, paying whatever the rack rate is for weekend, is probably right around $500. But then you can bring as many students, children, nephews, nieces, grandchildren, whatever the case might be, for $25 a piece. And we have a couple of sponsors who have agreed to put up enough money so that if the demand is there, we can go out and rent a bus and fill it with 2/3 or 3/4 with younger people trying to learn a little something about the Civil War without breaking their banks and stuff. So with that in mind, I hope that that you will appreciate. Greg and I are going to have a discussion tonight that is going to focus on first Fredericksburg for about half the program. Then we're going to migrate over to the April-May 1863 maneuver with Joe Hooker trying to maneuver Lee out of Fredericksburg Heights that resulted in the dramatic Battle of Chancellorsville. And so I think certainly there'll be something for everybody this evening, and I hope that you'll enjoy that. If you like this, tell everybody you know to go take a look at the interview and look at the others we have online. They are at the Blue and Gray's YouTube channel, which is a free subscription. Just look for Blue and Gray Education Society on YouTube and subscribe, and then you have access to more than 60 hours of interviews over 40 different speakers and so forth. So it's a pretty substantial resource. Again, a reminder for those who are members of Blue and Gray, if you haven't signed up yet for access to the video archives, we've got almost 340 interviews that are on our website and available for you to watch at your leisure as often as many times as you want. and you can do that if you're a member of Blue and Gray, an active member, and you haven't signed up yet. Get a hold of me through the website, and I'll help you get signed up so you can start accessing those. But in the meantime, Greg, I think we're about ready to start. Are you good to go?
Yes.
Good evening, Greg. Again, every time we get together, it's a good time. Ever since the very first time you and I met on the second Blue and Gray tour ever, which was an Overland campaign program, which we did back in 1995. You have been a strong supporter of Blue and Gray ever since, and I'm very grateful to you for that. And so it's fun. We both have sacrificed a little bit of hair and gotten a little gray over what 27 years now. Cripes. So I mean, my daughter's almost that old, so it has been quite a while. So welcome back, and good to have you with us.
Thank you. Speaking of your daughter, I remember you telling me that she was member number 1 officially, that your goal is to reach out to future generations. And I'm excited about this program because, as you mentioned, this is really aimed directly at getting some of the younger generations interested in the Civil War, or sparking the interest that they already have.
Well, the great side of it is, Greg, and I'm not that even hard over on the registration fee and the amount. I mean, we're asking, I think, basically $500 for the sponsoring adult, but I want the kids out there. I want college kids. We've structured this so the schools should be out at that time. We'll be in June and July doing this. The college kids are out. And we've set it over a weekend, so even people working and so forth, hopefully they could take off a Friday afternoon, get to Fredericksburg, check in and hear the intro lecture, and then go all day Saturday and finish up Sunday about 4 o'clock or so, and still get home in time to get on with the next week. But the $25 that we're asking for each student is about enough for lunch for 2 days, and that's really all we're looking for. We've got sponsors that have paid for the cost all the way up to a 55 passenger bus if there's a call for it, and that's covered. So we're not worried about losing money on this. We want to get people out there, and you and I talked about this, and I guess first question is, in your years and years of working in and around Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania and so forth, give me some of your thoughts now that you're retired. What are the things that were most memorable to you about working in the Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania area?
Well, as the last portion of my career, I think I got promoted to supervisor in 1993, if I remember correctly, and I did just retire last year. So a significant amount of my time was as a supervisor, selecting, training, and evaluating the employees here. And the intern program was where we took college students and gave them a small stipend. They were technically volunteers, but to bring them on and give them an opportunity to work here in the park. So yeah, interestingly, dealing with basically the youngest people on the staff is one of the things that really ended up being the most rewarding. Even though many of them would not have an opportunity to become a permanent member of the National Park Service, it was interesting to see how many of them would go on to become, say, teachers or something else, but generally how much they enjoyed the experience. And kind of related to this program, one of my standard interview questions of interns is telling them they're going to be giving tours over the summer to families coming here on vacation, and that of every group that they have, of a family of 5, there's maybe 1 or 2 members that wanted to come to Fredericksburg as part of their family vacation, and that the other 4 are 3 or 4 members of the family that's in their group is more interested in going to Virginia Beach or going to King's Dominion on down the road. So yeah, so we train folks to realize that there's a different interest levels in the people that are coming to the park. And so as I think about this program coming up, I am again anticipating that there's going to be obviously some Civil War enthusiasts, but some other folks for whom we need to take a different approach to. So my question to them is always, how are you going to gear your program? You're going to try to make sure the Civil War enthusiast gets everything that they want out of it and are excited, or are you going to try to spark an interest in those that just are along for the ride? And so we're hopefully accustomed to doing that. And I've been trying to train staff members on how to reach both those portions of the audience, and that what we'll hope to do with Civil War 101 too.
Well, that was part of the reason that I was attracted to you, and also to folks like Rick Hatcher and Scott Hartwig and so forth, is that you've had a career as public historians, and so the essence of the service that you all provided over the years was to be able to reach across those different generations. And the one thing that I always observed when I would look at some of the more popular parks that were visited and see the number of people that came through there is that while Blue and Gray is an eclectic, as many of these Civil War tour groups and study groups were, they were an eclectic group that appealed to people generally who had financial resources and so forth. The reality of the matter is that 95, 98, 99% of the people that come to these battlefields are interested, but don't necessarily have an interest in a structured tour, either because of the cost or because the level of their knowledge is relatively superficial, and they're afraid of getting in deep water that they just would be inundated. And so when I looked at the work that all of you guys did, not only in your individual works, but also in the manner in which you affected the teachers that came in, the interns that you discussed, because those were the same folks that American Battlefield Trust, for example, and Pamplin Park have been having teacher institutes for just trying to help teach and get these people to understand this, but still the underlying aspect of this is reaching out to each individual person and finding where the spark is that will get them excited about the study of history and make it a continuing passion like we have enjoyed for 40 or 50 years of our own lives. So let's talk about Fredericksburg a little bit. You came in, this wasn't your first assignment in the Park Service, but it's the one where you placed your deepest furrows in the ground, and so you got to be one with the park and the community there. What is it about Fredericksburg that sparks you as a historian? What are the things that people who don't live in Fredericksburg or Spotsylvania don't appreciate about Fredericksburg and the area around there?
Well, one of the things that attracted me is the depth and breadth of the story that's here. That we do have 4 battlefields in the Fredericksburg area. We are almost exactly midway between Washington and Richmond, so the opposing capitals could put troops in the Fredericksburg area that could both protect their own capital and threaten the opposing capital. So it was really inevitable, and just looking at a map, and seeing the short distance directly between the two capitals, that there was going to be a great deal of fighting here. And I don't know, as far as the things that people don't appreciate, I guess it is that well, we are the largest military preserve anywhere in the world if the park was ever completed. Now, Chickamauga, Chattanooga owns more acreage than our park does, but we have a larger authorized boundary. So if we ever acquired every acre that we are permitted to, we would be the largest. And people often will come here and say, oh, they may have been up to Gettysburg and don't hesitate to spend 2 days up there, but come down here and think they can see it all in a day. So the biggest surprise of people is how much time it takes, just how much has been preserved, and the expanse of our story. A lot of people just kind of mentally look at us as one park and think they can spend the same amount of time here as they can at other kind of single battlefield parks, and that's just not feasible.
Well, I remembered for years and years, when I first took a look. I think the first time I got interested in the area there, I had seen Stackpole's book, Drama on the Rappahannock, and then I also saw Jay Lubas, and I think it was Harold Nelson, came out with the U.S. Army War College guides, staff ride guides to Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, and so forth. And I was close enough to the area in the late 70s, early 80s, that I got a chance to start looking around, and it impressed me just how detailed each area was. That you have two major battles at Fredericksburg. You have the huge logistics network there with the RF&P Railroad. You have the camp area that they built out at Stafford, that they uncovered there not too many years ago. You had the area. Who was that guy who just uncovered just scores and scores of federal camp material? What was that? Is it White Oak Museum or?
Oh, yes. There was a fellow named D.P. Newton. He and his family had relic hunted the Union camps virtually all of their lives. There was an excellent museum. The proprietor of it, D.P. Newton, died a couple of years ago, and the museum basically is no more. But yes, he uncovered a lot of things, and even with the museum gone, the information that he shared with the park staff has greatly increased our understanding of the winter encampment period.
What happened to all of the, because that was the most phenomenal place. I remember first time I saw it, Ed Bars wanted us to go there, and so he took one of our early tours over there, and we spent an afternoon just looking around Newton's. And Newton wasn't much. He knew his stuff very well. He documented stuff extremely well, but he wasn't a great communicator. And he reminded me of Mumbles in the old Dick Tracy cartoon series. I don't know if you remember that. And Mumbles he knew a lot, but he didn't speak clearly. But the resource he had was phenomenal. What happened to those resources? Are they just locked up in a building that nobody sees, or did they come to the Park Service, or what happened to them?
I don't know exactly, but my understanding is that some of the things on loan went back to the people that loaned them, and that some of the key pieces were accepted by, I think, the Virginia Historical Society, and I'm not sure what happened with the things that they had no interest in. Yeah, I wish I could give you a better answer, but I really don't know.
That's a shame, because that I think it was kind of like seeing what's the riverboat that sunk on the Missouri River that they brought up and have in Kansas City. I've got Sultana on the mind. It's not Sultana. It was they had a riverboat that sunk. They found out in the middle of a field, and all of the resources that were on there and everything. It's Arabia.
Yeah.
That's what it is. The Arabia. What Newton had there struck me as a mini Arabia. I mean, everything, like you say, just mined everything out of the camps and so forth. But the other thing that I really like about the Fredericksburg area is starting back even in colonial period, with all the colonial history of Fredericksburg, the historic area, Caroline Street and so forth, Sophia Street. But then you had all these areas that you could walk through. And I think, what do you think is the most pronounced thing that you saw in studying the town of Fredericksburg and urban warfare? What things struck you over the years as noteworthy?
Well, again, Fredericksburg had a 133-year history before the Civil War came along. I can go ahead and address some of the military things as well, but one of the things that struck me that I would also like to delve into in this program is some of the broad context and take a look at slavery in the city of Fredericksburg. We all like to say that people are a product of their times, and that is absolutely correct, but it does sometimes simplify things. We think that people of a certain time, because of their inventions and the other values that are more prominent at the time, or political beliefs or religious beliefs or whatever, kind of lock them in. And we find that history is, of course, very complex, and people had different feelings and attitudes and so forth. And one of the places I would like to explore in this tour, as we start to talk about causes of the war and get our understanding of slavery, is to go to a home of someone named, now of course, now that I'm being taped, her name escapes me, but
it will happen more and more as you get older.
Certainly. Let me, Mary Blackford. She gets married in 1925 and moves into this house. And she and her husband are both part of the American Colonization Society. And that group in and of itself has people on extremes. The idea of abolitionists feeling that there's so much kind of prejudice in the United States that there's really no way that African Americans could ever be viewed on the same plane as white members of society, feel that the best thing for freed slaves is for them to go to a colony somewhere outside of the United States. But some of the same people that believe in colonization are not against slavery. They're very much for it, but are against having any free African Americans in the country, feeling that that is too much of a temptation for the people enslaved to desire something different, and that it might encourage rebellions and things along that line. So here you got people on two extremes that like for people that are freed to go to a different location. So Mary Blackford is part of that society. But even though, just to show there's another niche to it, you might think, oh, people that own slaves don't want free people around their slaves, and people that are abolitionists, again, want people to have an opportunity to live somewhere where they're not going to experience a lot of prejudice. But Mary Blackford is a family of slave owners, but she keeps this journal about the atrocities against slavery. And one of the more interesting things that she will write about in 1835 is an incident where she has a cook that she owns. That cook is married to a man that is owned by some other, again, slaveholding family. And she talks about the evening that they have had dinner. And after dinner, the husband of the cook is brought in by somebody that's working for a slave trader to say goodbye to the wife. The owner of the husband has decided to sell that person. And Mary Blackford will write that, this husband and wife may never see each other again. And the very tearful exchange. And, finally, the husband at one point says, okay, I'm ready to go, and looking down at tears dropping on his shackles of his hands and things. She gives a very detailed account of that. And it's interesting to think, she has a solution that she proposes. She says, I will sell my cook so that the couple can stay together. And the person that is taking the husband away, explains to her that that's not going to produce the result that she wants, that each individual is sold to the highest bidder and there's no way to keep it together. And you might look at her situation and wonder if she's being hypocritical herself. Should she take a harder step? Should she make an effort to buy her cook's husband if she feels that strongly? So that's something I would like to tell that story and try to set that up in such a way that it can induce some discussion, to look at the complications of this institution of slavery. And then there are military aspects. There are military firsts that occur in Fredericksburg. Another thing that comes to mind with your questions. Fredericksburg is known as the first real battle in the United States of America in which there is urban warfare. I went on the trip that you sponsored down to Zachary Taylor's campaign, and the Battle of Monterey was a battle in a street in that war. But
Right.
But nobody after that battle said, oh, here's a place that we might need to be engaged in combat. Let's come up with a doctrine of how to clear streets. That never happened. So in the city of Fredericksburg, Union soldiers are expected to clear out Confederates, and they really don't know how to do so. And it leads to some very harrowing experience where some Massachusetts soldiers go a half a block into the town and find that not only are there Confederates in front of them that they could see that they pursued, but they didn't properly clear buildings behind them, and they're getting fire from all directions and getting pinned down. And just before the street fighting is another first, and that is crossing a river while under fire. We apparently have in our history periods of which the Navy has landed from ship to shore and been under fire while landing from an ocean or some other kind of large body of water, but never have they been under fire moving from one side of a river to the other. And the chief of artillery for the Union Army, Henry Hunt, came up with the idea of getting some volunteers to hop in board the boats that supported the pontoon bridges, the pontoon boats supporting the stringers and planking of the bridge that they were trying to build across the river. And so, again, if it's something you've never done before, they're thinking, well, how many men do we want to put in a boat? Do we want to try to shoot as we're going across? Or are we going to focus on just paddling and getting across as fast as we can? If you've never done anything before, there's a lot to try to decide. And so that's another aspect of something, two very unique things that occurred in Fredericksburg, militarily wise.
You know, what I've always enjoyed in looking at Fredericksburg when we're over at Chatham, and you have the large display of the pontoon boat and stuff set there. We've always tried to deal with that in our discussions, but I think the point's exceptionally well made when you talk about Barksdale's men in the basements and from upper windows and so forth, with the opportunity to sharpshoot and pick people off. It's mighty lonely when you're out there on a boat and you're trying to lash the next boat in front of it, and people can pick and choose at the time they wish and literally just pop people off and find them falling into the river. And then you sit back and say, is there any way we can get at these people and complete this thing? And of course, as you remember, the challenge of getting pontoons across, especially at the upper crossing, in particular, is heartbreaking to see what's going on. I mean, people they don't have a solution. They don't have a way of getting there other than brute force going ahead and then asking a question. Well, can we send some people over in a boat? Do we have enough fog cover? Do we have what we need to do so maybe we can clear a beachhead just so our guys can work on this? And that in and of itself, I think, is a story. Unfortunately, we get into the streets quickly. Then you've got the ditch you have to deal with, and then you get outside of town. I think the thing that strikes me the most about Fredericksburg, and for years and years and years, you always had the authority to condemn and tear down the houses in front of Marie's Heights, but there isn't enough money in the world for the Park Service to ever get enough to actually restore that battlefield. And yet, I think it's almost impossible to understand what those people actually were exposed to when they tried to assault against the sunken road and the stone wall and so forth, because of the open ground and the lack of cover. I mean, they only had terrain and so forth. So I think that Fredericksburg has got so many neat sub themes to it that the day's going to go very, very rapidly, and I'd be surprised if we have a heck of a lot of time to even talk about the second Chancellorsville, or the second Fredericksburg, like we did last year with you and Paul back in December. But it is a part of the story, and of course, the other day that we're going to spend there is probably the most, well, it's unfair to say it's the most famous battle in the area, because Wilderness, Spotsy are so important. Where do you stop? But we do also transition. In the second day, we go into Chancellorsville, and that too is a different and unique form there. In looking at that, I've read Pat Ferguson's book. I read Stephen Sears' book. Have given some critical thought. Stackpole, of course, had a book over there as well. And what I'm wondering, in all the time that you looked at Chancellorsville, what were the things that struck you most about what? Did Joe Hooker have a good plan, or was he fatally flawed from the time he took command, in your opinion?
Well, when it comes to the tour coming up, I think this is a good discussion point to look at some of the different ways of viewing Joseph Hooker. He started off by making a very great maneuver of his forces, landing them in rear of Robert E. Lee's army, about 10, 12 miles in rear of Lee's army. And so an opportunity to attack him from behind at his most vulnerable point. And then he kind of stopped. So did he lose his nerve? I've even heard that the people with, an expertise kind of in psychiatry and so forth say that often a braggart will fail when it gets to the point of decision, that when it's time to deliver, Joseph Hooker had bragged saying, when I get to Richmond, when I get into Lee's rear, may God have mercy on him, for I shall have none, and all kinds of boasts. Boasts which caused Lincoln, for example, to respond to some of his boasts with one of his famous stories related to the farm animals, in which he said that the hen is the wisest of the barnyard animals. She never cackles until the egg is laid. So Joseph Hooker is a very boastful person. Is it just part of the personality? My gosh, I'm about to deliver a victory. Something must be wrong, so that's one thing. Another element of it, some people wonder if, since Joseph Hooker was at the Battle of Fredericksburg, was participating in the fight against that open ground against Marie's Heights, where the casualties were so lopsided, basically 7 or 8 to 1 Union casualties versus 1 Confederate casualty. That did he walk away from that battle at the end saying, with Civil War tactics and such, the only way to win a battle is to fight defensively, make the enemy attack you. On my next battle, I'm going to try to take a strong defensive position when the opportunity comes up and make Lee attack him. Did he retreat into the defenses around Chancellorsville, where there's a road network that comes together? Was he thinking, all right, the Confederates have left Fredericksburg, they're going to, and left their supply line, and as a little background to that, because of spy network, Joseph Hooker knows that Lee is getting 2 trains a day, and that is not enough to feed his army, that Lee is anxious for the spring to come when the grass is green up and some of his horses can live off the land. So is Joseph Hooker thinking Lee must fight his way through Chancellorsville, through Hooker's army at Chancellorsville, to get the next railroad to the west that is only about 20 miles or so further? So does he have that logic on his side? Or there is a cavalry raid that is part of his campaign. He had intended it. The battle is going to start on May 1st, and Joseph Hooker had intended for his cavalry to launch their raid on April 14th. They crossed over the Rappahannock River in a hailstorm and decided to turn around and go back. And the river rose as such that they really couldn't get over till, I want to say, April 27th or so. So is it that Joseph Hooker feels that an important part of his plan is to allow his cavalry to get far enough south to threaten Lee's supply line to hit that railroad that is only giving him barely enough supplies to get by? And if we break up the railroad, Lee has no choice but to flee in the direction of Richmond. Is Joseph Hooker pausing at that point to try to give his cavalry more time to get in position? And Hooker, and with the things that he has written, there's just not enough for us to tell what his reasoning was. So those are some of the things that people kind of kick around as they look at Joseph Hooker. And as an interpreter, I like to try to get folk to think about those things and kind of reach their own conclusions. I guess my gut reaction in trying to look at what things that do exist, again, none of them give us in my opinion, a solid defense for any of those particular points. But I tend to think that it suggests to me that he wanted to fight a defensive battle, feeling that is the best way to achieve success. So kind of the middle option that I've shared is the one I think is probably the most accurate.
You know what I like about that, and I certainly appreciate the points that you just made. I think the thing that struck me so much was when Hooker steals the march on Lee. There's no question. He remarkable achievement. And when he sends Meade down the river road with the intention, I think, of turning somewhere around Banks Ford, I think, trying to turn Lee off of Fredericksburg Heights. And then it appears that he has achieved his objective, which was to draw Lee off the heights. And so what I'm struck by was that he withdraws Meade back to his works, which seems to support the belief that Hooker really intended either for Lee to leave completely. And I agree, if Stoneman does get in on Lee's rear and gets towards Ashland, which is, I think, he wanted him on the Virginia Central and hopefully getting to Hanover Junction to break that up, that Lee doesn't have any choice but to fall back maybe all the way to the north or the South Anna Rivers. And then Hooker gains 30 miles of land and a different perspective in terms of pinning Lee against his capital. But when Stoneman's raid doesn't pan out, then I think his second element, which was, Lee must attack me in my trenches or flee ingloriously, I think was the term he used. And so I think as soon as he knows that Lee is coming down to face him, he pulls back into his defensive crouch and then misinterprets the Jackson flank march. And that opportunity is a remarkable one. And, in looking at that, I want to ask this the right way, and may not come out right, Greg, so work with me on this. But it strikes me from what I saw of Howard's position, the 11th Corps' position, astride nearing the Brock Road, it looked to me that Hooker lacked one corps basically to link with Ely's Ford. If he does that, he's got this huge tête de pont just from one end of the Rapidan all the way around to the Rappahannock that forces Lee to hit at him. And yet Lee finds this one open flank and the intelligence is brought to him. What is your sense of the decision that Lee made concerning the flank march? What do you think of Lee's decision there? And what is the consensus of, was it a good decision or was it too reckless and ultimately cost him Jackson and Hill and nearly cost him his army? What's your sense?
One of the things that Jackson would say, I believe it's either on the ambulance ride from where he has his arm amputated down to the building that he would die in, or maybe it was even in the building that he died in. But he at one point said that Joseph Hooker made a huge mistake by sending off his cavalry because he said that was basically what enabled him to make the maneuver. So if that is with hindsight, that's one thing. But I do know that the Confederates were aware that the Union Army was on a cavalry raid. And I think that Jackson might be explaining the reasoning why they made the maneuver. The Battle of Chancellorsville is fought in some thick woods known as the Wilderness. The area was heavily cut in colonial era and thereafter to convert trees into charcoal to fuel the iron furnaces. So if there's not a field somewhere, and there aren't a lot of open fields, but the areas where there aren't fields are generally dense growth, trees that have just started to grow up and competing for the light, not very tall, growing very thickly. A fair amount of light, therefore, is going to get down to the forest floor, and there's a lot of entanglement and stuff. It's almost impossible to maneuver through, and it is impossible to basically see through. So if the Union Army has no cavalry with which to scout, and the Confederates have noticed very little Union cavalry thus far at Chancellorsville, and again, Jackson is aware, at least shortly after the battle, that Hooker has sent away virtually all of his cavalry. I suspect they knew it by the time of the battle, and the decision to make the flank maneuver is made. And the woods are too thick for any of the infantrymen to really spot anything. To me, it looks like the decision was one in which, hey, the Union Army doesn't have an opportunity to adapt to this maneuver. Let's give it a try. I really don't see either of those officers as what you'd say gamblers, to say, well, let's this is maybe a 50-50 chance. Let's see if we can do it. I don't think they really tried to do something that they weren't confident that they could be successful at it, even though obviously nothing is ever certain. But that's kind of my take. I would, if I had an opportunity to witness anything, I would love to have been there for the last moments of the last meeting to see, because at the last meeting where Lee and Jackson sit together to make this plan, as soon as the cavalry reports that there is a road that can lead to the flank, Lee's next question to Jackson is, what do you propose to make the movement with? And Jackson basically answered, I want to take 30,000 of the 45,000 men we've got available. And Lee's next question was, what will you leave me with? It's really a matter of simple mathematics, that if you got 45,000 soldiers and Jackson takes 47, or excuse me, takes 30,000, that means there's 15,000 left behind. But so I think what Lee is really asking is, do you realize what you're leaving me with? Because they had captured enough prisoners to know that the Union Army should have around 70,000 soldiers actually on the field, and the only thing between the Union Army and Richmond was going to be Lee with his 15,000 soldiers. So I think Lee was genuinely surprised at that point by the number of troops that Jackson proposed. And I would have loved to have heard the rest of that conversation of what kind of a discussion was on why Jackson should take a vast majority of the Confederate soldiers. I think Lee clearly was not thinking that that was the number of troops that should be sent on this maneuver, that they discussed it the night before. They had decided the night before, on the evening of May 1st, if we can find a road network to lead to that flank, we should attack it. But they apparently did not discuss anything about numbers of troops. So somewhere along the line, there was a discussion that this is a worthwhile endeavor to make with a large number of troops.
You know, the thing that in remembering and in interpretations that I've done of the last meeting for groups and so forth, the thing that I was most struck by, Greg, was the discipline that I believe Lee went through in making the decision. I think Lee understood, because I think he had done enough recon during the course of the day before he met with Jackson. I think his path of least resistance was, I think Lee was looking for something that might cut the Federals off from U.S. Ford or one of these others. And so he had reconned to the north while he was waiting for Jackson to come up from his area south of Fredericksburg. And I think he had come up with craps. Every time he looked at it, he saw that there really was no opportunity for him to insert himself or his troops between Hooker and the crossings on the Rappahannock. And then this intelligence comes in that the federal right is in the air. And my guess is that if they were in the air in that large gap between Hooker's flank and the line over to Ely's Ford was such that he could get in between there and interpose himself basically in the rear of the federal army, I suspect that he probably admired that Jackson wanted to bring a critical mass at a decisive point on the battlefield against the Federals' weakest point and hopefully just literally blow up what Hooker was trying to do there. And so I agree with you. I think it'd been very, very fascinating to have been a fly on the horse next to Lee and Jackson as they rationalized out what did he expect 30,000 men to do. What we do know, of course, is that Lee does tell Jackson, because he's so concerned with the possibility of the Federals interposing themselves between those two flanks, that he instructs Jackson and says, you have to be holding hands with me by tomorrow night. You have to come back and we've got to link back up again because I can't stand to have them in between. And that leads to my next and perhaps the last area that we'll explore in the Chancellorsville discussion tonight, is that it's fascinating, and I really want to know your insight into this. You know, as I've driven, and so many people have driven the famous flank march, and there's a spot in which Jackson's move is spotted. He has to go past an open area, and so people who are looking to see what the hell's going on see the Confederates moving in that direction, and a decision is taken to try to cut the snake of a column that Jackson has and cut it in the middle somewhere. And so the Federals break their discipline, and the people supporting Hooker or supporting Howard's flank leave their line and move to Hazel Grove and engage in the flank march, and they hit the rear portion of that, and in doing so effectively not only leave Howard's flank open but remove his supports as well. And so literally the 11th Corps is just sitting there. And my question for you is twofold. First, what have you guys, and what has been your consensus thought about the fight against Jackson's rear at Hazel Grove? What did that do, and what is consensus of all those brilliant historians like you and Frank and those other guys about that part of the battle? What do you guys think about that?
Okay, when Jackson's column is spotted, it's actually spotted at a couple of places, but the last thing that the Confederate forces are doing when they are spotted is marching to the south and seemingly going away from the Union Army. The Union Army is to the north of a place called Catherine Furnace, and Jackson's troops are spotted at the furnace moving south. When Joseph Hooker gets the word, it seems to go in accord with his understanding that the Confederates, if they're not going to attack him at Chancellorsville in his strong defensive position, the other logical thing is to try to work the way around him, march south, and then hopefully probably head west to get to that railroad to get his supplies. That fits in with what Joseph Hooker is thinking is likely to happen in this campaign. So when the Confederates are spotted moving away, Daniel Sickles, the corps that is right next to Howard, so Howard's on the extreme right. The next one, as you work your way to the center, is Sickles, and Sickles is told to move out against the column as soon as it passes and kind of follow it. Now, the only cavalry that is with the Union Army, except for, say, small bodies that are, say, cavalry escorts for corps commanders and such, there is a brigade that is there. Alfred Pleasanton is the senior cavalry officer, and they're told to kind of follow Sickles. And if Sickles sees the Confederate march break down, take that cavalry and charge it in among them in kind of classic Napoleonic style. So Dan Sickles will move forward, and he's again just supposed to kind of harass them along. Many folks wonder, okay, since we're fighting in the wilderness, is Joseph Hooker waiting for them to get out of the wilderness to some more open terrain where you can mass your forces in an attack? It's tough to launch a good offensive and take advantage of superior numbers in the wilderness. So are they waiting for the troops to get out of the wilderness before they attack? Why is it that Sickles is just supposed to push them along? Well, as Sickles pushes along what is supposedly the rear of the Confederate column, well, that 15,000 soldiers under Robert E. Lee are just off to his left flank. And they crash into, if there's a big attack, it's not Sickles crashing into the rear of Jackson's column, it's Lee sending a couple brigades against the flank of Sickles as he marches by Lee off to his east with the 15,000 troops. So it's kind of like a big startle surprise. Hey, I thought the Confederates were retreating. What were these troops over here attacking me? So that's kind of my take on what happens, why Joseph Hooker is being cautious, and why that doesn't cause more havoc than perhaps it should, because Lee is doing a great job with his role in this, something that is often skimmed over or overlooked, that the Lee has a real important part in this, not only heavy skirmishers to try to make a portion of the Union Army think that there's still Union Army there, but again, in an area where the retreat is occurring, well, what are all these Confederate soldiers doing here?
Well, I've forgotten the unit. This is my plea to my own increasing age, but the unit that is on Howard's left, they cross all the way over. They cross Hazel Grove and they engage, don't they? So there's a huge gap left, basically from around the Wilderness Church all the way back down towards Chancellorsville. And is that fatal to Howard? Or if they're there, does Howard perhaps find an ability to stand strongly somewhere around Wilderness Church or along the lines there? And does this thing unfold differently in your mind? It just strikes me that Howard doesn't have any supports when Jackson hits him, and as a result, he's not going to stop until he gets to Chancellorsville, to the Chancellor mansion, and he can get some cover. And I'm just wondering if uncovering Howard as a result of what was going on over by Hazel Grove was significant to that, or do you tend to disregard that and just believe that Howard, in the language barrier and the inexperience and the surprise of Jackson's men coming out of a sinking sun, just hit him at the right place, right time, and the route was on, and it was going to happen?
Yeah, so not only was the Corps immediately to the left of Howard pulled out of line and therefore unable to perhaps turn and face Jackson's men, but the only reserve that he had, a brigade of Barlow, Francis Barlow is the name that you were trying to think of. That brigade is sent away to support Sickles in his fight down there in the Cathode Furnace area.
Yeah.
How substantial was that? Well, when it comes to the extreme right flank of Howard's line, since even though the Union soldiers out there would report on up the line the presence of Confederates out in that vicinity, nobody would believe them or feel that the people reporting it really knew what they had observed. They're either too green or they're not very good soldiers. It was the opinion of superiors. So nobody accepted the word that Confederates were out in the woods a short distance from their flank. So as long as that's going to be the case, that troops are frozen into position, no troops, even the best in the entire army, could have fought any better. Some of those units had to wait until the units between them and the Confederates retreated through their lines. And it is really interesting to see how many units claim they got off 2 rounds or 4 rounds. And again, muzzle loading gun that takes 30 seconds to load, that means they fought 1 minute or 2 minutes when you get off 2 or 4 rounds. They just didn't have a chance. Now, the reserve brigade was at the other end of the line, and approximately 3,000 Union soldiers did have an opportunity to face Jackson. But again, Jackson took 30,000 troops on the march, but because they were running out of daylight, Jackson went forward when he had about 18,000 in place. So 18,000 Confederates facing 3,000 Union soldiers, that line is still going to collapse. So I'm sure that the reserve unit would have joined in with that. So how much longer can, say, 4,000 men hold off against 17,000? Then 3,000 would hold off. So my estimate of this, and of course it's just a sheer guess, is that maybe that line would have held 15 minutes longer with another 1,000 troops there. Just a guess.
That's a point pretty well made. I recall that as the attack on either side of the turnpike takes place, of course the Confederates have more difficulty in the irregularity of the wilderness foliage and so forth that tends to, I think, cause problems for the troops advancing on the south side of the turnpike, whereas it appears that the troops north of the turnpike at least have the opportunity to break into the open much sooner, and so there's a staggered assault there. But I guess the one question I want to ask before we go, Greg, because I don't know the answers. It's not a gotcha question. I've looked at it for a bit. And when you go to the 11th Corps, to the new interpretive area, for years and years, we always interpreted Jackson's flank attack from the cemetery area up there, and then looked down. And then subsequently, as land was acquired and an interpretation was set up there, and we got out into that field where the Union encampment was the original roadbed of the turnpike. Is it offset north of the 4-lane highway by several hundred yards? Was that the original turnpike, or does the original turnpike sit under or near the the westbound lane or the eastbound lane. I just don't know, and I was just wondering if you all knew where the original turnpike footprint was.
Yeah, a fun thing to do when you're passing through the Chancellorsville battlefield is to look at the eastbound lanes of the, well, for those who don't know, the Orange Turnpike is right now a 4-lane divided highway.
Yeah.
And what they did was, when they decided to make it from a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road, the new road, as opposed to the old road, is engineered. So it has cuts through hillsides, it has fills through valleys. And the side that is the original bed, they just basically made improvements to it, but it goes up and down hills. You take a roller coaster ride when you follow the turnpike. So you will notice that the eastern portion of the battlefield, if you're coming from Fredericksburg, the westbound lane, which is on the north side, is the original turnpike. That holds true until you start to get into Howard's Line. In the area around Wilderness Church, for those that are aware of that, that is near the left end of Howard's Line. It crosses over, and there you'll see that that it's the eastbound lane. The south lanes are the historic portion as you travel through most of Howard's Line. And it's the north side that is the brand new lane, which is all engineered. So even if you don't have a map or anything, just think, when you travel through the heart of the Chancellorsville battlefield, the 4-lane divided highway, if you see things going up and down, you're on the original bed.
Okay, so the original bed is basically in between the 4 lanes, and shifts from one side to the other. It is not offset to the north towards the Wilderness Church. I always thought, when you go to that interpretive spot where Howard was, there's a level, or there's a depression down there that you go through, and I looked at that, and it looked about 14 feet wide, and I said, is this the original roadbed? And you're saying that the roadbed was never that far north, that it was always basically within the confines of the 4-lane road, but it switched from side to side, and where you have the roller coaster effect, that is where the original is, whereas the addition of the other 2 lanes crisscrossed that, and they just basically put them parallel, and the original road just runs in between the 2 and underneath one or the other.
Well, the original bed. All right, let's try this some other way here. So if you're at the flank of the Union Army, the extreme right flank for Howard, the eastbound lane furthest to the south is the original.
Okay.
And as you work your way down the Union line, just in front of the Wilderness Church, that's the area where it now crosses over, and the original bed becomes the westbound lane on the lanes to the north side. So there's only one place where they kind of cross. Engineering wise, for whatever reason, they decided to cross over, whereas all the way from Fredericksburg, it's the original bed is the westbound lane. For whatever reason, they crossed over there, and the original bed became the eastbound lane. So only one place where the turnpike is in the median strip, and that's near Wilderness Church.
Got it. Okay. Well, golly sakes, it's 5 after 9. We, every time we get together, Greg, it's just enlightening to sit back and just share thoughts and talk about what we both love so very much, which is sharing history with people and talking about what it means. And I think that this program is going to be the cat's meow. I think it's going to be the start of a series of programs that is going to really be something that we can present. I think people who are buffs will get something out of it because they can answer questions, get into the depths of things. And those who are just getting started, little basic things like where'd the road go and all that other stuff, and how did people in Fredericksburg live, I think are enough that they're going to engage a lot of people and perhaps get some excitement. I've already, since we've been talking, I've already got some people targeted who've got some kids and stuff that I'm going to tell them, okay, you got to be there. So sounds exciting. Anyway, Greg, I want to thank you so very much for taking your time tonight to do this. I got your input the other day, and I'm going to get a registration form up online here by this weekend. And those of you who joined us tonight, please spread the word if you think this was a good, if you think this was a real good discussion. Tell people to be looking for it, because we'll have it up on the YouTube channel here in the next few days or so. So with that, Greg, if we got so far into it, if anybody's got any questions when we knock this off and people drop off, if you can stay up for maybe 5 minutes and answer a question or two, if anybody's got one, we'll do that, and then we'll shut things off and go away by 9:15, if that's okay with you.
That's just fine. Thank you.
Okay,
again,
folks.
Look
Thanks.
forward to this creative program. You're always trying to do new and different things to see what the audience out there will respond to. And I'm really glad to see the Civil War 101 concept. I hope it's a tremendous success for Blue and Gray Education Society.
Well, with support of folks like you, I think it's going to go very well. Folks, I think Karen will let me, if you want to unmute yourself. I appreciate having y'all with us tonight. That concludes our program. Greg has agreed to stay with us for 5, maybe 10 minutes at most, to answer any questions that you may have or that you want to raise at this time. And if there are no questions, then we'll drop off shortly, but go ahead and unmute yourself. And thanks for joining us, and have a great night. Okay. So let's see. We got, okay. Folks, I think if you're still listening, you can unmute yourself. Let's see, I've hit a button that says ask all to unmute. So unmute if you want to chat, and we'll give you a moment or two, and you can, if you don't have a question, I understand that. And let's see, I see John Willen is unmuted. John,
yeah,
you got a question?
Well, with Greg, I never have to have a question because he covers it so well. But I just want to say hi to Greg and to Karen.
Hi, John.
Good to see you, Greg.
I referred to you on a tour the other day that according to you, Longstreet, if his injuries occurred at the places that the accounts are, that John said that he was shot in the back, right, not in the front.
That's right. That's over there with Chris Murkowski.
Yeah.
But John, I got your PayPal the other day. I appreciate that a great deal. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't remember, if I had when the renewal was, so that's fine. I just extend it.
Yeah, I was delighted to see it. I said, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate it much. Send that money.
I figure you can use the money. So
I can always use the money, and you're smart. You stay a good distance away from me. Folks who go out with me usually get the fatherly arm around the shoulder, and I say, have a great time today. When I'm coming for your wallet, I'll tell you. But you're doing a good job. You stay just at arm's length, so I can't really get my arm around you. But the time
Well,
is coming.
The,
One
the
day.
pandemic has something to do with that.
Well, it has. I wish we'd get this thing sorted out so folks could get out and start enjoying themselves again. I'm starting to see people come out of the woodwork, but there's still folks that understandably still have some concerns and stuff about being out and mixing company. And I respect that. It is what it is, and we just have to all be patient and with each other.
So Greg, you got to come to in June. You got to come to the service for Ed in Gettysburg.
Yes, I did get the email about that, and I'll absolutely be there. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
where
I wish.
First met
I'm sorry. Go
Greg.
ahead.
I first met Greg on one of Ed's tours at Shiloh.
Really? How
Some
long ago
years
was that,
back.
Tom? Or how
It was-
long
it
ago was
was
that,
when-
John?
It was when he was working on his Shiloh book.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, we did a Shiloh tour with Greg not too terribly long ago, and Ed.
Well, this was with Ed and Tim Smith.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, Greg has been out with us a number of times, and I say they enjoyed his Shiloh program a great deal last year. It was the first program we did out of the pandemic. So it went pretty well. We enjoyed ourselves. So, well, good.
Yeah, well, I still miss Ed a lot, but
Yeah.
Okay. Any
just
other
can't
questions
replace
or
the guy.
anything?
well, no. Thanks for all you're doing, Lynn. It was terrific.
Thanks. Glad you joined us, and we had a good time. I hope I'll see you sometime soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Karen, thanks very much. I think we're ready to roll it off.
Okay. Night, guys.
Good night.
Thanks,
Bye,
Greg.
Karen.
Bye.